Good evening, I'm Amna Nawaz.
And I'm Jeff Bennett. On the NewsHour tonight, a second apparent assassination attempt on former President Trump, this time at his Florida golf club, raises more questions about Secret Service protection.
TikTok fights for its existence in court, the legal challenge to a law that would ban the app in the United States.
And on another deadly day in Gaza, the United Nations Coordinator for Relief discusses the dire circumstances there.
The needs have only grown because the whole of Gaza lies in ruins.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions, and friends of the NewsHour, including Leonard and Norma Glorfine, and the Judy and Peter Bloom Kovler Foundation.
Two retiring executives turn their focus to greyhounds, giving these former race dogs a real chance to win. A Raymond James financial advisor gets to know you, your purpose, and the way you give back. Life well planned.
The William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, for more than 50 years advancing ideas and supporting institutions to promote a better world, at hewlett.org. And with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the NewsHour. The man suspected of trying to assassinate former President Donald Trump while he was golfing has been charged with federal gun crimes.
It is the second apparent attempt on the former president's life in just over 2 months, casting an ominous shadow over the 2024 presidential race. Laura Barone-Lopez begins our coverage.
An FBI investigation is underway, one day after the U.S. Secret Service thwarted an apparent attempt on Donald Trump's life, just on the other side of these palm trees.
Yesterday afternoon, this country was reminded of the heightened and dynamic threat environment the United States Secret Service and its protectees face on a daily basis.
It happened while he was playing golf at his own course near Mar-a-Lago. No injuries were reported. Law enforcement remained clustered outside the perimeter throughout the night. In Washington today, President Biden responded to what now appears to be a second assassination attempt against Trump.
Thank God the president's okay. The one thing I want to make clear, the service needs more help. And I think the Congress should respond to their needs if they in fact need more services.
The Secret Service said an agent had spotted the barrel of a rifle pointed from shrubbery that surrounds the golf course. It was about 300 to 500 yards away from where the former president was playing. The agent immediately opened fire, and Trump was rushed off the course. The gunman dropped his weapon without ever having fired it and fled.
The swift action of that agent doing his job, pushing out ahead, sweeping while the president was behind him several hundred yards and several holes away, out of sight from the gunman, did his job, and that was what alerted the detail, and the swift action is what triggered that.
On social media last night, Trump credited the Secret Service's, quote, absolutely outstanding job for keeping him safe. The Palm Beach County Sheriff said the agency did exactly what it needed to do, even if security wasn't as tight as it could have been.
At this level that he is at right now, he's not the sitting president. If he was, we would have had this entire golf course around it. But because he's not, the security is limited to the areas that the Secret Service deems possible.
Soon after the initial encounter, local police and a chopper descended onto the scene, and body cam footage showed the moment authorities arrested the suspect on a highway about 50 miles from the golf course. A witness had tipped off police to a license plate number for the suspect's vehicle. He was identified as 58-year-old Ryan Wesley Routh. Officials recovered 2 backpacks and an SKS rifle with a scope, which were left behind on the outskirts of the golf course. And phone records show Routh spent nearly 12 hours near the property before being confronted. Today, Routh appeared in federal court, charged with possession of a firearm by a convicted felon and a possession of a firearm with a destroyed serial number. If convicted, he could face anywhere from 5 to 15 years in prison. A look at public records and Routh's social media history paints a picture of a once Trump supporter turned critic with a deep fixation on Ukraine and its war with Russia. Routh self-published a 291-page book on Ukraine and global politics, where he talked about the end of his support for Trump. He's been interviewed several times over recent years about his support for the Ukrainian war effort, and even traveled to Kyiv in 2022 in an attempt to join the front lines.
My initial goal was to come and fight.
Routh also had a decades-long criminal history that includes several misdemeanor and felony charges. He will be back in court later this month for a bond hearing and arraignment. In a post on X, Trump quickly blamed the incident on Democrats, specifically the so-called rhetoric of his opponent, Vice President Kamala Harris. And he suggested, without evidence, that violence, like the Sunday incident, would get worse unless undocumented migrants are deported. Meanwhile, in Washington, Harris put out a statement condemning the attack, saying, quote, "We must all do our part to ensure this incident does not lead to more violence." A bipartisan congressional task force is already investigating the first assassination attempt on the former president, when in July, a bullet grazed his ear at one of his rallies in Pennsylvania. They were briefed on Sunday's incident by Secret Service and are awaiting more details. Ranking member on the task force, Democratic Congressman Jason Crow, spoke about the task force's work this morning.
The scope of our task force was limited to investigating the Butler, Pennsylvania incident, so there were a lot of things that went wrong there, and it's just too early to tell whether or not those same issues were at play here or not.
It's unclear how the incident will affect Trump's schedule, with just 50 days of campaigning left to go. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Laura Barone-Lopez.
The White House says the President Biden spoke with Trump and conveyed his relief that the former president is safe. Let's look a little deeper now at the challenges facing the Secret Service. Late today, Acting Director Ronald Rowe again vowed to take a hard look at the agency's strategy and procedures after the latest threat to former President Trump.
The Secret Service's protective methodologies work, and they are sound, and we saw that yesterday. But the way we are positioned right now in this dynamic threat environment, it has given me guidance to say, you know what, we need to look at what our protective methodology is. We need to get out of a reactive model and get to a readiness model.
For more now, we're joined by Carol Lenig, investigative reporter with The Washington Post and the author of The White House says the President Biden spoke with Trump and conveyed his relief that the former president is safe. Let's look a little deeper now at the challenges facing the Secret Service.
Civilization is a vulnerable thing, a whim of circumstance. At any time, the smallest flap of a butterfly's wings may set catastrophe in motion. Harran, an entire city wiped from the map. Those left behind there did not stand a chance. The world's greatest minds came together and found a vaccine against the Harran virus. Finally, mankind had prevailed against the disease. But people always want more. Despite a promise to shutter its labs, the GRE continued its research in secrecy for military purposes. It didn't take long for a variant of THV to escape into the world once more. The fall happened more rapidly than anyone could have predicted. The few who survived now live in small enclaves. The only means of contact between distant human settlements are lone individuals, brave or desperate enough to travel on their own across dangerous wastelands. They are known as pilgrims. Somewhere on the map, one city is still standing. A city isolated from the outside world. A city with special rules. Now, it's the last bastion of humanity. A chance for us to learn from history. And for once, make the right choices. Because every choice you make here shapes the future. Irreversibly.
much everyone loves Lucas now? Interesting. Sure wasn't like that when he was alive.
I don't know. He always seemed pretty well respected to me. Remember what he said about William?
It was strange. Maybe one's right. The war with the renegades ain't no good for us.
Juan's a poser.
Jack Matt, though, that's what it really looks like. Leads by taking concrete action, not with performance art.
He can take action.
You got those hungry, need to buy something eyes. Impressive selection, right? Finally, a smart shopper. I hope your purchases do you proud.
Leadership, right?
I got mixed feelings.
You're gonna love my prices. Take a look around. Wow, and PK quality too. Nice. Hell, you got me jealous. Adios, amigo.
You can tell me. Heck, I'll even put in a good word for you if you like.
Once you shop PK, you can't go away. Tell your friends to stop here.
These are peacekeeper premises. Follow the rules, or you'll be arrested.
It's high time command deals with the water issue. We need to take the water tower back.
Good day, citizen.
I wish the guard folks would talk to us more. This shit is silly. We all want peace.
Good evening. The White House says the President Biden spoke with Trump and conveyed his relief that the former president is safe. Let's look a little deeper now at the challenges facing the Secret Service. Late today, Acting Director Ronald Rowe again vowed to take a hard look at the agency's strategy and procedures after the latest threat to former President Trump.
The Secret Service's protective methodologies work, and they are sound, and we saw that yesterday. But the way we are positioned right now in this dynamic threat environment, it has given me guidance to say, you know what, we need to look at what our protective methodology is. We need to get out of a reactive model and get to a readiness model.
For more now, we're joined by Carol Leonnig, investigative reporter with The Washington Post and the author of Zero Fail, The Rise and Fall of the Secret Service. Carol, good to see you. Let's just start with what we learned from the acting director there this afternoon. The suspect here did not have a line of sight to former President Trump, never fired his weapon. So what are you hearing from your Secret Service sources? Do they consider this a success?
They do consider it a success in one respect, Amna, and that is that this gunman never got a shot off at the agents or at former President Trump. And that's a lot better than what happened on July 13th. In other words, they had a heavy contingent of agents with Trump while he was golfing on Sunday, people that were on the lookout for problems in the fairways and in the rushes and in the woods ahead of him, a hole ahead of him, and agents behind him, making sure there was nobody lurking behind Trump as he golfed. And that extra presence ended up being extremely successful in that an agent who was assigned to Trump's protection was a few hundred yards ahead of him before he was golfing and was able to spot this gunman and a barrel poking through the fence line. But what I'm also hearing is that Director Rowe is very concerned about the safety of Donald Trump going in through this election. 2 times now in 9 weeks, he has been the subject or the target of a gunman with a long rifle and a semi-automatic, and that is really disturbing. There are big questions about whether or not the service can protect him on an enormous field that is called a golf course, especially when it is porous, unsecured, and not on a military base as some of the places where President Obama and President Reagan used to golf.
Carol, as you heard my colleague Laura report there, the Palm Beach County Sheriff noted if Trump were a sitting president, the security presence would be different. You noted the success in this particular case, that no shots fired, he remained unharmed. But has former President Trump's detail changed at all since the last assassination attempt? And should it change moving forward?
It absolutely has changed since July 13th. I'm told that he had a contingent with him on Sunday that was at least a Secret Service contingent with him that was equivalent to the protection level for a president. What's different, of course, is that they didn't close off streets, the public streets that sort of border this golf course in West Palm Beach. And that might have been done, or that might have been temporarily done for some fairways that he was playing through that are very close to these roadways. You know, a gunman, if he had been more successful, would have been tens of feet or dozens of feet from Trump if he had not been spotted ahead of time. And if he had been president, those roadways may not have had the same kind of access to the gunman who actually sort of camped out there, as far as we can tell, for 12 hours before Donald Trump arrived.
You have long reported on what you've learned from your sources about the resources issue, the personnel and staffing issues within the Secret Service. You heard the acting director there talk about wanting more resources from Congress, but also moving from a reactive to a readiness model. What does that mean, and what would it take?
So first off, I just want to underscore how dramatic it is what Acting Director Rowe said. There has been no director of the Secret Service who has suggested there was anything that needed fixing in the protective model, or suggested that the Secret Service was more reactive than proactive. In the 10 years since I covered a series of huge security lapses and gaffes, no Secret Service director has said anything but, my guys did a great job against terrible odds, some paraphrase of that shape. It is a very, very big deal what Acting Director Rose said today, that he wants to review how the protective model works and rethink it and where it may not be working well. He's also the first director to say publicly, and he didn't say as much about this today, but he has said this in other settings that I've been hearing about privately. He's the first director in those 10 years to say, we are going to need a lot more money. We cannot, as he said it today, we cannot continue to do more with less. And that's an acknowledgement that just isn't part of the Secret Service's DNA. They're always of the mind, and I've met many directors, they're always of the mind, hey, boss, we got this, we got your back, everything's fine. This is the first time I'm hearing a director say either of these two things.
Carol, in the 30 seconds or so I have left, how worried are the Secret Service sources you talked to about continued attempts against either former President Trump's life or any of the other candidates?
Extremely worried. After July 15th, there was a great concern about copycats, somebody trying to repeat what Matthew Crooks did in Butler, Pennsylvania. The fact that this has happened again only ratchets up the anxiety level. It only makes them convinced that it could happen tomorrow or next week.
Carol Lennick of the Washington Post joining us tonight. Carol, thank you so much. Good to speak with you.
You too.
Bam! Almost had it. Oh, and it's gone again.
Inhibitor container nearby.
Got it. Oh, this looks more like squirrel than mink. Well, I'd better get to the bazaar and give this to Lola.
Inhibitor container nearby.
Are you kidding me? How? This here's the party. Ignore the pinata. Here I come. Duck. You got zero chance, fucker.
Inhibitor container detected.
Hey, you. Yeah, you. Looking for work, by any chance?
Found some powdered milk in the old school, hidden behind this collapsed metal cabinet.
Oh, here you go.
My precious mink! Oh, you are truly sent from above. Lola is complete once more. You deserve a reward. Do you wish Lola to reward you with a song?
Sure, why not?
I sleep and I dream of your love. You were sent from above, like a soft turtle dove. I wait to the touch
Good evening.
of your
The day's other headlines start in Central Europe, where
hips. My heart does beg for lips. Are you not hypnotized? Are you not enthralled by Lola's voice?
I am. That was otherworldly.
Such a compliment. You were such a dear boy. And a terrible liar. But Lola appreciates your kindness. You deserve a more proper reward than a song anyway. Take this with Lola's deepest gratitude.
Thanks.
When one of us is killed, they barely notice. But when the commander is killed, they turn the place upside down. Sometimes if I stay out too long, I can get the feeling there's no one left in the city. This horrible fear of welcome.
Aiden, this is Sophie. Let's talk now.
Going to Saturdays today?
Back to the street where we began, feeling as good as love you can. Into a place where thoughts can bloom, into a room where it's 9 in the afternoon. And we know that it could be, and we know that it should. And you know that you feel it too, 'cause it's 9 in the afternoon, and your eyes are the size of the moon. You good 'cause you can, so you do. We're feeling so good, just the way that we do. When it's 9 in the afternoon, your eyes are the size of the moon. You good 'cause you can, so you do. We're feeling so good. Back to the street, down to our feet, losing the feeling of feeling unique. Do you know what I mean? Back to the place where we used to say, man, it feels good to feel this way. Now I know what I mean. Back to the street, back to the place, back to the room where it all began. Back to the room where it all began. 'Cause it's 9 in the afternoon. Your eyes are the size of the moon. You good 'cause you can, so you do.
Oh, watch out for that, my boy. Ah, had your eye on that, did you? Bold choice, son. Auf bye!
Apparently you can't go through the tunnel either. Ader's keeping us prisoners in a...
You look anxious.
Look, Urban, your nosy friend's back.
Found a job?
No luck yet.
It's not about luck, kid, but about character.
Like yours?
Ballsy. Okay, then. What does your hungry soul crave?
Someone like you must know a lot.
Out of modesty, I won't deny it.
And maybe a little bird told you what might have happened to Lucas?
You know, I heard a pilgrim has come to the city. Very nosy. Grills people about stuff. Gets in the way. Sounds a lot like you. It can't be a coincidence.
Sure it can.
I don't believe in them.
You know anything about Lucas or not?
Oh, that kind of information is expensive. You can't afford it.
I could work for it. You got any work I could do?
Leave your CV with my secretary and we'll get back to you.
Come on, don't fuck with me. I'm serious.
You barge in here like you own the place. Takes coconut-sized balls. That's my kind of man. Or should I say, pilgrim. Okay. I might have a small errand for a tough guy like you. Take care of it, and we'll see whether you're worth knowing.
What do you need?
Minor thing. Need you to check in on a guy who's late delivering my order. Been incommunicado for a few days now. Might be trying to avoid me. He usually doesn't keep me waiting. No one does.
Who's the guy?
Hubert. Half-assed Hubie, we call him.
Met him. He lives up to his nickname.
Need you to find out what's up with him this time.
Okay. I'll come back after I've spoken to him.
He lives in the tallest building on the edge of Trinity Court, opposite the bazaar on Horseshoe. You can't miss it. But getting to him is another story.
Why?
Hubert's not just a fence. He makes money where he can, and now he's hiding from half the city. He's super paranoid. Lives like a rat in a maze to keep himself safe. You'll need to climb up and find one of his secret passages to get in.
I can handle it.
When you're there, give him the password Sayonara, so he knows I sent you.
Got it.
I've been waiting 3 years for the Carnage Hall tournament.
I wonder what the hell is going on in the central loop since PK's restricted access. Some say the renegades are about to attack.
Sophie, you wanted to see me?
I've been hearing about you.
Good or bad things?
Useful things. The ones that make me believe it's worth giving you a chance.
What are you proposing?
Go to one of the craftmasters, Alberto or Vincenzo. Both know the location of the purest crystals. I need a few for a certain transaction.
Alberto and Vincenzo? Tell me more about them.
A father and son duo. Alberto, the father, tends to yammer on. Before 0 hour, he had a workshop and piles of cash. Vincenzo, his son, is kind of shy. They're both craftsmen, clever, too. The kind that can make a watch out of old gum and a piece of string.
A certain transaction, Anything I need to know about?
Curiosity is the first step on the road to hell, Carl says.
Do you believe that?
I believe in not trusting strangers, and that's who you are. So far, at least. Bring me the location of the crystals first, and we'll see where we go from there.
Those crystals, what's the deal with them?
They were created by the chemical bombings of a city. A byproduct of some sort. People believe the infection spreads slower if you wear them. Honestly, I don't think it does. But there's no harm in trying.
And that's why they're so important to you guys.
That and many other reasons. They're hard to get, difficult to destroy, and easy to get obsessed with. 'Cause they're so pretty, right? But most importantly, they're real, tangible things. Way more real than a piece of paper and old money. That's why they're so bloody expensive.
Fine. I'll go talk to one of those craft masters.
They're in the bazaar. Do well, and we can think about giving you bigger jobs.
A pilgrim in the bazaar? If I were him, I'd clear out before he pisses people off.
Back in the day, I had a huge, a massive,
A workshop, Dad.
Yes, a workshop.
So where is it? You're not in one now, Alberto.
She's against it too.
Sophie sent me. She says you know where they can find some crystals?
Oh, for fuck's... They've already sent one of their...
Fuckwits? Who?
That fellow... Sophie's brother. Huh? What was the asshole's name?
Barney. The asshole's name is Barney. And he asked the same question about a dark zone with crystals.
Yeah, that's news to me. So where is that dark zone?
It's 120... 100 and...
Dad, can I tell him?
Oh, please.
100 meters from the metro. There's a big sign, fashion store, and a windmill on the other side of the street.
All right, thanks.
This is a family-owned shop.
Have you seen a ginger with a mohawk? Bastards.
When one of us is killed, they barely notice. But when the commander is killed, they turn the place upside down.
People seem to like him. Not the one who killed him, I bet.
Won't give you for the butcher goat. No way.
Come here. Well, what did you find?
I know the location, but I was told your brother asked about it already?
Herman! See if Barney turned on his radio. Barney? Answer me. Barney! Damn. So that's why he's gone offline. He's looking for the crystals on his own. And throwing a wrench in the works yet again.
This isn't the first time, I gather.
No. He's always trying to prove himself. Last time he got wounded. Wasn't that long ago either. A fucking kid. I'll kill him. I'll just kill him.
Why blame yourself? We all make our own beds.
Listen, you said it yourself. You're new here, so you don't know much. I'm responsible for security here, and he's my brother. I promised I'd look after him.
You promised? Promised who?
Never mind. I'll kick Barney's ass when he gets back.
How'd Barney get wounded?
He didn't want to tell me. My guess is that the PK's got a hold of him.
Your brother keeps secrets from you?
That's none of your business. Barney, answer me! Damn it all to hell! If he went to a dark zone in his condition, he's a goner.
I can try to track him down.
You?
I've been in the dark zone before. In the GRE hospital.
St. Joseph Hospital? Really? If you save him, you won't regret it. We still have some time. Barney will likely wait till dusk. Going into a dark zone during the day is suicide. Just bring him back home safe.
I'll do my best.
Good luck.
Good evening.
The day's other headlines start in Central Europe, where authorities say at least 16 people have died amid catastrophic flooding. A slow-moving storm system is pounding the region with unrelenting rain. Poland, Slovakia, the Czech Republic, and southern Germany are among the hardest hit. Sejal Karia of ITV News has our report.
Such is the size and scale of the flooding across Central Europe, it's being called a catastrophe. In Poland, raging rivers and torrential downpours have swallowed whole towns and villages in the southwest of the country, leaving people stranded on the roofs of their homes. This, the only means of rescue. Whole swathes of the continent submerged by some of the worst flooding to hit in 30 years, from Austria to Romania. The gushing force of the floodwaters sweeping away everything in their path, destroying lives and livelihoods. The death toll rising from the devastation caused by Storm Boris. The waters in Kłodzko in Poland ripping through, leaving no stone unturned and no street and road untouched. The highest rainfall has been in the Czech Republic, in the town of Jesenik. They spoke of barely believable water levels. The water was rolling in here, this man said. The flooding here is a disaster. It's really terrible. In Lower Austria, the area surrounding the capital, Vienna, has been declared a disaster zone. 2 elderly men died here after being trapped by rising floodwater in their homes. A firefighter also lost his life. These are difficult, dramatic times, the regional governor said. The country and the people are under immense strain. And it could get worse in places before it gets better. More rain is expected today and tomorrow before drier conditions move in. And Storm Boris moves on. Italy next in its path. Sejal Karia, ITV News.
Turning now to the Middle East, where Palestinian officials say Israeli airstrikes killed 16 people today across the Gaza Strip. One of the strikes crushed a home and a refugee camp in central Gaza, killing at least 10 people. Meantime, political tensions are growing within Israel amid reports that Defense Minister Yoav Gallant may lose his job. Israeli media say Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu may fire the popular former general. Gallant has become the Prime Minister's biggest rival in the cabinet. Speaking in Washington, D.C. today, Israeli opposition leader Yair Lapid, who is himself a Netanyahu critic, urged the Prime Minister to keep Gallant.
I expect him to run the country better than he does in ways, and I sure hope he will not fire Minister Gallant, who's doing a good job under terrible circumstances.
For its part, the U.S. State Department today said that the U.S. continues to engage with partners like Egypt and Qatar to try to present a revised ceasefire proposal for Gaza, but no timetable for such a proposal has been provided. The U.S. State Department has marked the 2-year anniversary of Mahsa Amini's death in Iran to call on the country's new president to do more to protect women. The 22-year-old died after she was arrested by Iran's morality police for allegedly not wearing a headscarf properly. In a joint statement with other nations, U.S. officials urged the new Iranian administration to ease pressure on civil society in Iran and to end the use of force to enforce the hijab requirement. Amini's death sparked mass protests around the world. A crackdown in Iran killed more than 500 people and some 22,000 were detained. A gas pipeline that exploded in the Houston suburbs this morning sent a geyser of fire into the sky. A nearby neighborhood and some schools were evacuated. Officials say some homes caught fire. Firefighters tried to contain the flames. The operator of the pipeline says the gas feeding the flames was shut off, but that it could take hours or longer for all of the material to burn off. Officials say the focus is on keeping the fire controlled.
All the resources that can be extended are here and present. Again, we're just in a containment mode to any of the facilities that are in close proximity.
One firefighter suffered minor injuries. It's not yet clear what caused the blaze. The head of the U.S. Postal Service says he is personally fully committed to ensuring that all 2024 election ballots are delivered on time. Those comments come after a group of election officials raised concerns last week about the Postal Service's ability to deliver millions of ballots in November. In a letter today, Postmaster General Louis DeJoy wrote that some 650,000 postal workers are committed to providing a secure, efficient, and effective way for citizens to participate in the election. He added that in 2020, 99.9% of ballots were delivered within 7 days. Boeing says it's freezing all hiring and will consider temporary layoffs to offset the impact of an ongoing strike by factory workers. More than 30,000 Boeing staff on the West Coast are on their 4th day of a strike for better pay. Negotiations are expected to restart tomorrow. Boeing has seen a drop in orders for new planes after a piece of a passenger jet broke off back in January, sparking safety and production concerns. On Wall Street today, the Dow closed at an all-time high ahead of this week's Federal Reserve meeting. The index added more than 200 points, erasing its losses from earlier this month. The Nasdaq closed lower on the day, losing more than 90 points, and the S&P 500 made minimal gains. And a passing of note, Tito Jackson, one of the 5 brothers who formed the hugely popular Jackson 5, has died. He was the 3rd of 9 children in what would become a legendary music-making family. That's him in the back left. He sang background vocals and played the guitar for the iconic group, which ignited the career of younger brother Michael Jackson. Known for defining hits like ABC and I'll Be There, the Jackson 5 were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1997. Tito Jackson was 70 years old. Still to come on the News Hour, Tamara Keith and Amy Walter weigh in on the political implications of a second apparent Trump assassination attempt. A Miami climate activist turns warnings about sea level rise into a collaborative art project. And members of a multi-generational apartment community give their brief but spectacular take on family.
This is the PBS NewsHour from the David M. Rubenstein studio at WETA in Washington, and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
Good evening, I'm Amna Nawaz.
And I'm Jeff Bennett. On the NewsHour tonight.
Let's return now to the apparent assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump and the potential political fallout. For that, we're joined
The Justice Department and TikTok faced off in federal court today over a law that would require the app to break ties with its Chinese-controlled parent company, ByteDance, or be banned in the U.S. NPR's Bobby Allen is covering it all and joins us now. So, Bobby, it's good to see you. So what did the lawyers for TikTok's parent company, what did they argue in court today, and what was the case that the U.S. government laid out?
So TikTok's lawyers say this is a free speech violation in two ways. First, it would violate the free speech of 170 million Americans who use the app. That's more than half of the U.S. population. And secondly, the lawyers say it would violate the free speech rights of TikTok itself, right? We know TikTok is owned by a China-based parent company, ByteDance, but it has a U.S. entity in the Los Angeles area. And the lawyers said, look, that company too, when it makes curation decisions about what people see on the algorithm, that's a type of free expression. The Justice Department said, hey, hang on a minute here. TikTok is owned by ByteDance, and it's not just China. It's a country that is a foreign adversary. This is a country who can do espionage on U.S. citizens. This is a country that might be interested in the data of Americans. And because of that danger, it needs to be shut down by January 19th.
So how do we know, Bobby, that TikTok is a national security threat?
So TikTok's lawyers say the threat that China poses is theoretical, that the government has never shown any bulletproof evidence that the Chinese government has interfered in the app in any way. They can't show that China's ever used it for spying. They can't show that China has ever used it to influence the app. But on the flip side, the Department of Justice says they have done a lot of probing through the national security apparatus, and they've come up with a very compelling case that China does have the capability to use TikTok against Americans, but the details of it must stay classified. The Department of Justice says the nitty-gritty examples of how this is happening is top secret, and they won't reveal it to the public, nor will they even reveal it to TikTok's own legal team. And that has really upset TikTok's legal team and TikTokers who are on the app and say, hey, if this is so dangerous, show us the goods. Where is it?
And remind us of the stakes here, because I've seen some numbers that half of all U.S. adults use TikTok in some capacity. Is that the case?
Yeah, it's about half of Americans are on TikTok, extremely popular with young people. Interestingly, though, public support for banning TikTok has been on the wane. It used to be around 50% last year. Now it's somewhere around 32%, which shows that the American public is kind of backing away from this idea that TikTok ought to be banned. And look, it's really notable that both the presidential campaigns of Donald Trump and Kamala Harris have very active accounts on TikTok. Trump, of course, said he wanted to ban and tried to ban TikTok when he was in the White House. Now he says he's on TikTok's side. And Kamala Harris, as the vice president of the United States, is on the team essentially that is now actively trying to ban TikTok. So there's a real question. If this is such a national security threat, why are these two presidential campaigns using it so actively?
What do we know about how difficult it might be for ByteDance to sell or spin off TikTok?
It would be very difficult for TikTok to sell because the Chinese government is not going to allow it. It would require the blessing of Chinese regulators, and they have said repeatedly that TikTok is not for sale. So that is one hurdle. But assuming they change their mind, it would be technically incredibly difficult to spin off TikTok for this one fact. 90% of TikTok's users are outside of the US. So imagine that scenario, right? There would be one version of TikTok that would exist in America, and then all these other versions around the world that technically would be competing with the American version. It would be a real disaster from a business perspective, and TikTok has said repeatedly it's just not feasible. So to them, this is not a divest or ban proposal, it is just a ban.
So if TikTok loses this case, if they are ultimately unsuccessful, what does the future of this app look like in this country and for the people who've built careers as content creators mainly on TikTok?
Yeah, if this ban is upheld, as soon as January 19th, there's going to be a big crackdown. The app will be kicked out of Google and Apple's App Store. It's no longer going to receive software updates. It's going to die a slow death, and eventually it's not going to be usable at all on any devices within America. And doing business with TikTok would become a crime that is prosecutable under the law. So this is a very high stakes, very serious legal situation that TikTok finds itself in.
So lots of uncertainty around this case. Do we know what happens next?
We do. So by December, we should be getting a decision from these 3 judges on this appeals court in Washington. Either side can appeal for the whole appeals court to listen, and then ultimately it can be appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, which may have the ultimate say as to whether TikTok survives in the U.S. or not.
NPR's Bobby Allen. Bobby, thanks as always.
Thanks, Jeff.
Today, the United Nations called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the immediate release of all Israeli hostages, and for humanitarian aid access to be unimpeded. Nick Schifrin speaks to the head of the UN's humanitarian effort in Gaza. Good evening, I'm Amna Nawaz.
And I'm Jeff Bennett. On the NewsHour tonight, a second apparent assassination.
Today, the United Nations called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the immediate release of all Israeli hostages, and for humanitarian aid access to be unimpeded. Nick Schifrin speaks to the head of the UN's humanitarian effort in Gaza.
Sigrid Kaag is a Dutch politician, a former first deputy prime minister, and diplomat with years of experience at the UN and throughout the Middle East. He is now the UN's senior humanitarian and reconstruction coordinator for Gaza. She's visited Gaza often since taking over the job earlier this year, and today briefed the Security Council. Sigrid Kaag, thanks very much. Welcome to the NewsHour. In that briefing, the Security Council today, you said the war had, quote, turned Gaza into the abyss. What do you mean?
Well, everything is destroyed. Life has halted. Over 41,000 Palestinians have lost their lives, and over 90,000 have been injured. And in that group, you have a lot of women, children who've sustained life-changing injuries. So it is dystopian. It's also very strange when you go to Gaza, and I've been going in and out of Gaza over 30 years, to see that there's no buildings standing. The roads are destroyed. People are all huddled in tents. It's a total life-changing experience for everyone in Gaza and for those who try to work there, to render assistance. It is something you cannot imagine, let alone describe.
Let me highlight one recent success before we get to some of the specifics you just said. Thanks to agreed pauses in the fighting, the first of 2 rounds of polio vaccines have been completed and have reached 90% of Gaza's 640,000 children. How have the World Health Organization, UNICEF, and UNRWA managed to do that in the middle of a war zone?
Well, this basically is because they agreed and worked closely with the Israeli Defense Forces. And at the political level, I've discussed this with the authorities, that there should be humanitarian pauses. The parties to the conflict have agreed, and this gave the space to actually reach people safely. And securely. But it also meant we needed the cold chain to work, the equipment, the vaccines to be in Gaza, and thousands of volunteers to be in a position to actually do their job. It demonstrates that you need political will to achieve these kinds of operations, because it's highly complex and highly dangerous.
You noted today that the, quote, breakdown of law and order and looting of supplies are impeding assistance distribution, and you also said that there had been denials, delays, and a lack of safety for humanitarian workers. How short is Gaza of the assistance it needs?
Well, the gap is significant, let's face it, and it varies from day to day. It depends on the volume that actually is allowed in, that gets cleared and checked, but also the ability for humanitarians to come to the checkpoints, to the crossings, to retrieve it, to then actually take it back to the warehouses. And that's, of course, also where law and order, safety and security are serious issues. This is not only a matter of supplies to the crossings, it's also our collective ability to receive and distribute. And a lot more needs to happen in order to actually be affirmative in reaching those goals.
The UN's Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, or OCHA, says between the 1st of September and the 9th of September, only 62 trucks per day enter Gaza. But if you ask Israel, and Israel's coordinator for the government activities in the territories, or COGAT, they point out that commercial Palestinian trucks are entering 163 just yesterday. So why can Palestinians bring in trucks at a scale that the UN is unable or unwilling to do?
Well, I'm not going to make a blanket comparison here. What's important is that Gaza needs both. It needs humanitarian goods, because they're free of charge at the end of the day for the population, and it needs commercial goods. And the commercial sector has agreements with the IDF, but often it's the commercial sector from Egypt. It can also be from the West Bank or Israel. And they often organize themselves also that they have security on top of the truck, basically. As humanitarians, we can't do that. So we're both vulnerable, but we're also dependent on the approvals given. The most important comparator, I would say, is before the 7th of October, 1,000 trucks a day entered Gaza. So if you add up these statistics, on a good day, currently, 150 and 60, that's only 210. Now you can then easily conclude that it's nowhere near meeting the basic needs of the population. And the needs have only grown because the whole of Gaza lies in ruins.
As you know, Israeli officials question why there is any UN aid or humanitarian aid sitting inside Gaza. They point out the distribution problems within Gaza that you've struggled with. Why haven't you been able to overcome some of those distribution problems?
I would turn the question around. There are roles and responsibilities. Under international humanitarian law, the humanitarian workers need to be protected. They cannot be targets. The safety and security needs to be guaranteed. If the volume is too little or it's too unsafe because the fighting continues, humanitarians can't work. And you can see that in the statistic of the high number of humanitarian workers who've lost their lives. I wish it were as easy as statements. The complexity of delivering on humanitarian assistance in a war zone, which is Gaza, and the density of the population and huddled together in around 11% of the Gaza Strip makes this a totally different story. We need a ceasefire and we need the unconditional release of the hostages in order to actually start to reach people in a serious manner.
Just last week, there were strikes on a UN school turned shelter and on tents in the humanitarian zone al-Mawasi that Palestinians say killed as many as 40 people. Israel says in both cases, the targets were members of Hamas, senior members of Hamas in the case of al-Mawasi. Do you believe Hamas is using UN schools turned shelters as well as the humanitarian zone as shields for their militant activities? Do you believe these strikes were justified?
I don't think it's a matter of what I believe. We know what international humanitarian law says, that civilian infrastructure should not be used by any of the parties, and it can also not be a target. We always need to be mindful of the protection of civilians and the proportionality in the conduct of war. I'm not in Gaza right now, and I'm not an investigator. But we know the duty and the obligations on the parties to the conflict are very clear.
And finally, Sigrid Kaag, part of your title is reconstruction, and the Israeli military allowed foreign journalists to visit Rafah and the Philadelphia corridor that separates Gaza from Egypt late last week, and the images, frankly, looked like a moonscape. What will it take to reconstruct Gaza?
One has to imagine, indeed, a moonscape with a very desperate population, a population that was highly educated, that is keen to have their children be learning again, a population that yearns for a ceasefire and the ability to restart what was left of their lives. So everything is needed. The cost will be humongous. An earlier damage assessment, a basic needs assessment done in March already indicated an initial cost of 18 billion. The cost of reconstruction will be significantly more. And this needs a long-term commitment, political, but also in financial terms, from the different stakeholders, but also private sector and investors. But we need to start the plans now. They're available. The Palestinian Authority has designed them. The international community has them. It's a long, hard slug which requires everybody. And to not forget about the population in Gaza. When there's a ceasefire, the work is only beginning.
Sigrid Kaag, thank you very much.
Let's return now to the apparent assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump and the potential political fallout. For that, we're joined by our Politics Monday duo. That is Amy Walter of the Cook Political Report with Amy Walter and Tamara Keith of NPR. Great to see you both.
Hello. Good to be
So
here.
now the second apparent attempt on Mr. Trump's life in just the past few months. We should know President Biden, Vice President Harris, Governor Walz have all condemned the violence. Mr. Trump is placing blame squarely on Democrats now. Earlier on to Fox Digital, he said this about the shooter, quote, he, the shooter, believed the rhetoric of Biden and Harris and he acted on it. Their rhetoric is causing me to be shot at. Tam, there was a moment, a brief moment after the first attempt on his life in which it felt like politics was paused for just a moment. There's really none of that now. Have we grown numb to this violence?
Well, it was a very brief pause. As the Republican National Convention was starting, there was this question, is President Trump, former President Trump, going to tone down his rhetoric? Are Democrats toning down their rhetoric? Are Republicans doing it at the convention itself? There was some of that. It didn't last long. It was very brief. This time, it does feel different. I think that the campaigns are treating it differently. Obviously, former President Trump is treating it differently. partially that's because the suspect didn't fire a shot. This was, although a close call, although an assassination attempt, and that's the way it's being treated by law enforcement, it was not, there wasn't a video of violence happening.
Right.
And I think part of that, there is less shock this time than there was last time. And I think that the political response is different. For instance, after the first assassination attempt, the Harris campaign immediately said, we're pulling all our ads down. No one's pulling ads down right now. Right. This campaign is 50 days, the election is 50 days away, and there just wasn't a beat, there wasn't a pause.
Yeah, we actually, we were polling right at the end of July, so basically 2 weeks after the shooting in Butler happened, and we were asking folks a lot of these same questions about who do you blame for this, or is there, should Democrats, I think we said specifically, is there rhetoric, we asked specifically about the rhetoric about to blame for this assassination. Americans were divided 50-50, and what's interesting to me is they were divided 50-50 regardless of party identification. Usually, that is such a partisan question, right? Do you think Democrats are responsible for this? But I think part of the reason it was so evenly divided was that you didn't see the participation of either Trump or Democrats in this conversation. It was very much of a, we're talking about this person specifically who took the shot at Donald Trump. We are not making this into a political issue. Donald Trump did not make it as blatantly political as he is right now. So I would expect that we will see voters kind of follow where the politics go on this. The other sad and sadly predictable thing in this poll is we asked people whether they think that whether they have concerns for political violence continuing. So this is at the end of July. What do we think political violence will look like going into November? 86% said they expected this.
86%.
Yes, and and post-election as well. And only 20-something% said they were shocked that something like this could happen.
That echoes what we hear from law enforcement and national security sources as well. Meanwhile, speaking